By the way, happy holidays, everyone. These days, you don't need an excuse to have a little get-together at your place. You want to watch the big game or a New Year's party? Whatever. Stock your party with drinks from Drizzly, the go-to app for drink delivery. Download the Drizzly app or go to drizzly.com. That's DRIZLY.com. You can schedule drinks to be delivered up to 2 weeks in advance or in as little as 60 minutes. Plus, Drizzly helps you save dough by comparing prices on a huge selection of beer, wine, and spirits from local stores. So grab that to-do list of yours and cross out, go to the liquor store. Download the Drizzly app today or go to drizzly.com. Again, DRIZLY.com. No more going on beer runs or stressing out about finding a particular bottle of wine. Download the Drizzly app or go to drizzly.com, the go-to app for alcohol delivery. Must be 21, not available in all locations.
The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, give a 5-star rating, and leave a review. Check out all our past episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you pod. What if these celebrities weren't famous? What would they have become? What was their first job? We're about to find out.
My next guest happens to be an author, a recording artist, and actor. He hosted the show Rescue 911, starred in T.J. Hooker, and of course, most well-known for his portrayal of Captain James T. Kirk in Star Trek. 92 years old. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest this week on Celebrity Jobber, the one and only William Shatner. Mr. Shatner, good morning.
Good morning to you.
How are you, my friend?
So well. And yourself?
Ditto. Very excited to talk to you. See that you've got so much going on. How do you keep such a full schedule at your age?
I get up in the morning. I wash my face. I choose whether to shave or not. And here I am.
Well, I choose whether to shave or not, too. But I think things are working a little easier for you. Tell me a little bit about yourself growing up in Canada.
I was born in Montreal, Canada, and did a lot of theater and film from the age of 6 through. I never really did anything else. I barely passed my university exams. I went to McGill University, Canada, and immediately went into the theater, which I had been doing as an amateur. Immediately went into a professional theater upon graduation, and then just went from Stratford to New York to Hollywood. I had a talent, and I had a good look, and I was very, very lucky. And so my career has been, of course, filled with effort and disappointment, and the visages of life have been in front of me as much as anybody else's, but I have survived, and I'm here now as a result of extraordinary good luck, although the life forces that come upon everybody also have come upon me, but I have survived, and I'm appearing, and the miracle is I'm appearing in a theater so that your listening audience can come and see me and hear me and be entertained by me, and by me being entertained by your audience. So the culmination of all that life arrives at your theater in the next couple of weeks.
November 8th at the Straz in Tampa, and then on the 11th of November at the Van Wezel in Sarasota. You started acting so young. Were your parents into the theater? How did you get into that?
I tell you, the antithesis of being an actor was my family. Like, what? That's unheard of. You just go into business, make a living, get married, have some kids. That was my fate, as is the fate of many artists who, being an artist is not considered a choice, I guess, most in the world, because most artists live in some kind of midlife crisis.
Right.
All the time. In the middle of life, not necessarily middle age, but in the middle of your life, you're always in a crisis because nobody wants to pay an artist a really good wage so they can survive and be artists. An artist anywhere in the world, I would think, is considered little less than a normal citizen, and they struggle, and most artists struggle to the end of their life.
Do you remember your first job in general with, not being an artist? What was your first paying job?
I've never done, since the age of 6, I've never done anything else.
Really?
But entertain, right?
Since the age of 6?
A waiter. I've never been a cab driver. I've never collected unemployment insurance. I've never done anything else but stand in front of people and either performed other words that were written for me or words that I wrote.
Wow. Incredible.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, people have been a newspaper boy or a babysitter. You've done nothing but entertain since the age of 6. I find that fascinating.
From time to time, for example, in Montreal, in Canada, there's a national broadcasting called the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, CBC. So they would put on dramatic shows once a week. It might be a religious show, it might be a news show, and they'd hire local actors. And they began to hire me, so I'd make, $10, $15, $20 to do a show. That money became my allowance. And I was going to school on money that I had made, and eventually I made enough money to put myself through school, and then enough to survive. And I never asked my parents for anything, who were struggling to make their own lives.
What kind of business were your folks in?
My father was a clothing manufacturer.
Okay. Tell me about, I know that you had that big role in Star Trek in 1969. It was canceled, and I read you took any odd job. So those were acting gigs, I presume. Yeah,
and that year I put together a summer theater tour, and I had an old truck, a really old truck, and I put a cab on top of it, and I lived in that cab for several months because I couldn't afford the motel. This was after Star Trek, and I toured the East Coast summer theater in that little truck with a cab on top.
Wow. And now, how did you become a recording artist? I love Common People, one of the songs that you've done. I think it's incredible. How did you get into recording music?
Well, that's an interesting, fairly complex story. I won't get into the complexities of it, but when I was doing the series Star Trek, a big label asked me to do an album. So I did a concept album. I didn't realize at the time it was a concept album. And it wasn't very successful, but there were a couple of things on the album that I thought were pretty good, and the idea was good. And eventually, Ben Folds, this musician, wrote me and wanted to work with me, and subsequently Ben and I have become really good friends. And I began to record. I did an album of his, and I did some songs, and then he and I collaborated on a well-received album called Has Been, and then I began to do albums on my own. Then a blues album I did went number 1, and a Christmas album I did went number 1, and I've got an album out there now, and I've just finished a children's album. So the magic of singing, I can't sing, but I have a feeling for the rhythm of English.
Right.
So between putting music to the rhythm of speaking and this whole idea I have that music is more than just, I'm in awe of the great voices, whether it's a crooner or opera singer. That's the magic of being human. I wish I could do that, but I do something else.
Trip to space. Everybody thought it was unbelievable when William Shatner got the chance to go into outer space. How can you describe it to us? Is there any way that we could understand what you experienced up there?
So let me put it this way. I've been an ecologist since reading Rachel Carson's book, The Silent Spring. That's a long time ago, and I've been talking about global warming for a long time, which she forecast. When I was up there and saw, the word tiny, minute, doesn't begin to fashion how small the rock we live on really is, and how thin the envelope of air that we breathe, how thin that is. It's 2 miles thick with oxygen. I was astounded. I was profoundly moved by how insignificant we are and how the world is and how we are. That insignificance has become a rallying cry for me, including a number in my album that's coming out. That's something I will discuss in length if I'm asked in appearing in your town on stage live. I'll go into it much more depth if I'm asked.
And it's William Shatner live on stage, and that would be November 8th at the Straz in Tampa, on the 11th of November at the Van Wezel in Sarasota, and I believe other dates up on your website, Mr. Shatner, williamshatner.com.
5 cities in southern Florida, and I hope I see all of you who are listening to a wonderful evening in the theater.
Looking forward to seeing you, and I greatly appreciate your time with me today.
Thank you. Appreciate being with you.
I mean, obviously, this guy started acting as a 6-year-old, but big break has to be James T. Kirk from Star Trek. Of course, I couldn't really get into too much specifics in acting because of the actors' strike currently going on, so I had to kind of be careful and navigate around a lot of that kind of stuff. But he was cool and pretty much answered everything that we had asked him. So the big break, Star Trek, but he said he never had a job. He was never a cab driver. He was never a waiter. He started acting at 6 years old, and that has been his only job. As he says, words written for him or words that he has written and performed himself. That is it. Gives a lot of credit to his parents for their support of him and acting. He said that, his mom and dad, they weren't actors. They weren't in the show business by any means, but supported him as an, early age to pursue his dream. His father was a clothing manufacturer and grew up in Montreal, Canada. And, as far as people doing impressions of William Shatner, probably one of the most imitated. You're a pretty big deal when people do impressions of you. 92 years old. What an incredible life. And how on the ball is this guy? Fantastic vocabulary, sharp as a tack, very impressive. And acting his only job ever, which he began at the age of 6 years old. Still incredible to me. So everybody, thanks for listening. If you liked what you heard, please give us a 5-star rating, leave a review. You can catch all of our past episodes up on celebrityjobber.com. Follow us on Instagram, Celebrity Jobber Podcast. And please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you pod. That'll do it for this week's episode of Celebrity Jobber. Sorry about that, folks. I figure I'd give it a whirl. Crash and burn. Thanks again for listening. See you next week. I'm Jeff Zito.